worms or frogs. And she
Very
called me over.
caterpillars.
Caterpillars. But I do remember, she thinks I made this up, but maybe I did, but anyway, it reminds me of how we first met and how she fascinated me from the very minute I met her. She had some kids seated at her feet, and she was trying to show them not to, they were squirming, you know, with these little creatures. And so she called me over and she said, I want you to stroke this toad to prove that you won't get warts. And so I did, and we became friends ever since.
Your friendship, toad stroking.
But I have to say in front of a group of avid fans here that it was one of the luckiest things that ever happened in my life, that at that early stage, I met this woman whose mind just blew me away, and we would sit by the lake, you know, slapping mosquitoes, and here I was, a struggling artist who got D- in art in grade 9 in Farm Work Region from Miss Hudgens. And I remember her name. So I got to work in Canada 50 years later, the phone rang, and guess who it was? I recognized her voice right away. So I always knew you had it in you. But
why did you get D-? Because you call it tulip blue?
That's right. She would put, it was a daffodil, she'd put it up in front of the class. This is how you took art in the 50s. And she had a buzzer. She was like a little army sergeant, and she'd hit the buzzer and go, start work! And draw the daffodil, and exactly 20 minutes later, she'd hit the buzzer again and go, pencils down, stop work, and we had to hold up our picture. And she would go to you, and she said, well, now, what would you give that out of 10, dear? And I said, 9. And she said, no, 2. Thank you. Sit down. I said, 2. She said, 2 detentions. I said, what did I do wrong? I painted the daffodil blue. She never heard of David Hockney, right? Neither had he hadn't done it yet. But I used to tell Mother all these things, and I remember us sitting down by the lake as the sun was setting, and I remember asking her, I said, do you think you have to suffer in order to become a good artist? Her answer, I tried suffering and I didn't like it. She was very pragmatic. But for me, the joy came when she recognized who I was as a young artist. Never met anybody quite like her. Here we are, over 50 years later, and it's such a joy to still maintain our friendship from those innocent times. She's gone on to become probably Canada's most famous author, known worldwide, and I'm just always glowing with pride whenever I hear her latest achievements. But in those days, we were kids, and nobody knew who we were. But she kept sending me these poems, and I was in my second or third year at U of T, and she went off to Boston, and she somehow recognized that I had this love of language that I wanted to try and reinvent in visual terms. And I was going through my own kind of personal hang-ups as a 25-year-old kid doing a lot of art that looks kind of, it was my, what I call euphemistically, I can say it in front of the audience, my fucked up period. I was trying to figure myself out. Older son with a family of 4. All I ever wanted to do was paint and be an artist. And my mother said to me, you want to paint? Paint the bridge chairs. Something useful, right? But Peggy, Margaret, was there for me from day one. And I will always be grateful for her because she recognized that particular skill that I had. And she knew, when she started sending me her first poems, I went off to graduate school at the Cranbrook Academy of Art in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. If you've never been, it's a stunning campus north of Detroit, great American art academies there. And as soon as I saw her first, she sent me her first book of poems. I think we were in Vancouver at the time, Circle Game. Mm-hmm. And she knew somehow that it would fit my imagining, where I was, what I was thinking about at the time. And from the minute I saw the first poem, Children on the Lawn, join hand to hand, go round and round, I could immediately see what I wanted to illustrate. And I was always so excited because she'd done this for me that every time I finished a new illustration, I would write to her and tell her about it. And she was so affirmative and enthusiastic about everything. It just kept me on a high all through my years of graduate school. And I ended up doing my master's degree based on illustrative poetry. I did 6 volumes of poetry at Cranbrook from 1964 to 4 at Cranbrook from 64 64 to 66. Then I went off to Expo in Montreal. I knew that I had to be at Expo. Whatever else I did, I was in my mid-20s. I had to be at Expo 67. I was working there in the International Sculpture Pavilion, and Margaret was in Boston. So she came up to visit me at Expo, and she told me about this dream she had about Susanna Moodie, that her dad had told her about Susanna Moodie, and you kind of ignored him at the time.
We had the book in the house, but I didn't read it then.
Yeah, she read it when she was in the States, and it kind of impacted on her. The minute she sent me the manuscript, don't be embarrassed, I knew it was a masterpiece. I knew it was brilliant, and I knew I wanted to spend the next several years of my life to pay homage to this incredible collection. What she did was she préceded the florid chapters of the original book. Many of them, Susanna Moodie wrote a little bit like the Austins, and what have you, the forest is my cathedral, and all this kind of thing. But Margaret at the time, somehow, wherever you were in your life, it just fit what you wanted to do then, and the language is exquisite. Forgive me. The immigrants, after we had crossed the long illness that was the ocean, we sailed upriver. On the first island, the immigrants threw off their clothes and danced like sandflies. We left behind, one by one, the cities rotting with cholera. One by one, our civilized distinctions, and entered a large darkness. It was our own ignorance we entered. I have not come out yet. My brain gropes nervous tentacles in the night, sends out fears, hairy as bears, demands lamps, or waiting for my shadowy husband, hears malice in the trees' whispers. I refuse to look in the mirror. I need wolf's eyes to see the truth. Whether the wilderness is real or not depends on who lives there. This from a 27-year-old. Okay? The language was so exquisite and so clear as a bell. It was the first time that I related to poetry, which I often had a hard time with. I found poetry to be elliptical sometimes and not as easy to understand. This did it for me. It blew me away. And I vowed then that I was going to do everything in my power to turn this into her grand opus, our work together.